Good day, everyone. I'm Austir Panadero, former Undersecretary of the Department of Interior and Local Government, and currently the Executive Director of the Zwilig Family Foundation. Welcome to our session for today. This is about the institutional arrangements for disaster rehabilitation and recovery. The previous two sessions gave you an overview on the basic concepts and processes, as well as the framework in rehabilitation and recovery work. Our session on institutional arrangements will cover issues on how work can be organized, both for planning and implementation of rehabilitation and recovery interventions. We shall also discuss roles of various stakeholders and how they may assist in rehabilitation and recovery work. Our learning objectives for these sessions are as follows. At the end of the session, the participants will be able to describe and discuss the DRR structures in their own localities. 2, discuss the various roles and responsibilities of different stakeholders. 3rd, to conduct an inventory of different stakeholders in their own localities. And 4th, complete the Rehab and Recovery Committee template. So let us begin our session proper. As I said, the previous two sessions showed you the key processes and tasks involved in DRRM rehabilitation and recovery. It is indeed a very daunting task, especially if the magnitude of the disaster is huge and therefore a lot of multi-sectoral effort is necessary to get back to normal fast. It is critical, therefore, that there is proper delineation of roles and responsibilities and that coordination mechanisms are established so as to reduce or totally avoid confusion and ensure smooth planning and implementation. There are essentially two main units concerned with rehabilitation and recovery planning and implementation coordination. The local NDRRMC is the primary disaster management coordination structure at the local level as per RA 10121. But there are situations that the lead DRRMC would vary depending on the geographical areas affected by a particular disaster. This is shown on the slides. In addition to the above structures, the President of the Philippines may also create special task forces and appoint key officials to spearhead rehabilitation effort. This happened on numerous occasions, for example, the Yolanda rehabilitation as well as the Bohol earthquake, among others. This is being resorted to if the scale of the rehabilitation and recovery work is enormous and high-level coordination is necessary, cutting across bureaucracies. This is critical to fast-track recovery efforts. For major disaster events, national government has to move fast in supporting LGUs, be it on the technical aspect, financial, and logistical. It has also to ensure that destroyed or damaged national government facilities and infrastructure are immediately rehabilitated. Engagement of the private sector, the academe, the CSOs, international development partners, and especially the communities are likewise essential in faster delivery as well as in promoting transparency and resource mobilization in rehabilitation and recovery work. Rehabilitation and recovery planning is a major step that must be immediately carried out. The main body in the DRRMC that must attend to this is the Recovery Planning Committee. The committee should facilitate coordination of the different sectoral groups and stakeholders in order to prepare a rehabilitation and recovery plan. It may also create subcommittees to facilitate and speed up scoping of what needs to be done. The following may be considered. First and foremost is the infrastructure subcommittee. This practically deals with the lifelines, as we call it, be it power, restoring the water systems, roads and access networks, communication, vital facilities such as hospitals. Rehabilitation and reconstruction of damaged physical infrastructure is the priority of this subcommittee. The next one is a shelter. In most disaster events, be it an earthquake or a typhoon, which are more common in our country, shelter is always a major challenge. Thus, our shelter subcommittee is very essential. This is to provide housing facilities for the displaced families. Third is social services. This group should address welfare of affected families and individuals, including provision of continuing relief assistance to most vulnerable groups, until they are ready to return to their normal lives. Next is the Livelihood Subcommittee, responsible for emergency employment assistance, restoration of the source of income, or provision of alternative opportunities for employment, reinvigorating the medium, small-scale enterprises, and the development and paving access to financing to restart the economy. The next one is agriculture, and this is responsible for the provision of adequate farm and fisheries inputs and equipment and access to fisheries and crop financing for workers in the agriculture and fisheries sector. The last but not the least, of course, is resource mobilization and support. And this subcommittee is in charge of addressing and or facilitating the discussions and agreements on cross-cutting policy concerns and issues among different subcommittees, especially as it pertains to financing priority actions and investments. Additional subcommittees may be created depending on need and desired outcomes of the LGUs. It is essential that a subcommittee head be designated for each of the subcommittee organized, as there is a need to coordinate the work of each of the different subcommittee members to ensure complementary, efficient planning and implementation of sectoral rehabilitation and recovery projects. The subcommittee head reports to the Recovery and Rehab Committee chairperson, and if there are issues that cannot be resolved at the subcommittee level, it is the task of the subcommittee head to bring this up to the main committee by the head of the subcommittee concerned. For reference, there are similar arrangements at the national level, and this is shown on the slide. So for example, at the national level, infrastructure is headed by DPWH. The shelter committee is headed by HUDC, and now probably the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development, DSUD, and social services by DSWD, livelihood by DTI, and agriculture by DA, and the resource mobilization by DBM or DOF. At the local level, the Chief Executive or the NDRRMC may likewise designate the corresponding department heads to lead the respective subcommittee that directly concerns their department. Again, let me stress that LGUs may organize other subcommittees as they see fit. The main concern should be that there is a more effective and efficient coordination among rehabilitation and recovery teams in planning and implementation phases of the rehabilitation effort. Also, important is to have a very clear oversight mechanism during the negotiations and execution phases of the work. Now let us move to our next topic, the roles and responsibilities of different stakeholders. First, how do we define stakeholders? Who are they and why is there a need to consider them in rehabilitation and recovery work? Briefly, stakeholders are people or group of people or institutions that will be affected, positive or negative, by whatever actions your work teams will do. Putting it another way, stakeholders can facilitate or hinder and affect the outcome, results of the rehabilitation and recovery work, again, positively or negatively. Thus, it is essential that in order to speed up the rehab and recovery work and attain the desired outcomes, and that is restoring back the normal lives of the communities, stakeholders need to be facilitative. This can only happen if there is a clear understanding of who the stakeholders are, what their concerns are, and what and how they can contribute in carrying out the rehabilitation and recovery efforts. In a rehabilitation and recovery situation from a disaster event, the following are normally the stakeholders that must be considered. The LGU, because they're the primary players as it coordinates and implements the first line of action for rehab and recovery efforts. The national government, another primary player, especially if the impact of the disaster is huge and beyond the capacity of the LGUs to address. Action of the national government is normally triggered through the NDRRMC structure. And in certain occasions, the President may also have to issue orders to mobilize government resources for the purpose. The private sector, especially the business community in the area, is critical as they are the lifeline to the local economy. They provide the jobs, the services, the supplies, and moving the logistics for the recovery work. Thus, their concerns and priorities must be considered in any rehabilitation and recovery planning. In certain situations, they can also deploy their assets in restoring vital facilities as well as participate in mobilizing resources for rehabilitation and recovery efforts. This partnership between the private sector and the local government and the national government has been demonstrated in the way we responded to Yolanda as well as in the rehabilitation for the Bohol earthquake. Professional organizations and expert groups as well as the academic institutions are resources as well and stakeholders at the same time that can be mobilized by the local government and the national government in facilitating technical work for rehabilitation and recovery work, principally in the conduct of damage assessments as well as in assessing options, engineering options to solve and restore a particular damaged facilities. Professional associations and the academe can help out, can mobilize their talents and make this available to the local government. The civil society organizations, on the other hand, can facilitate community participation as well as provide technical expertise in certain instances. For example, in planning, their knowledge of the communities where they work can provide important data and information to rehabilitation and recovery strategy formulation. In the implementation phase, they can also help government monitor implementation of rehabilitation and recovery efforts, as well as, a very important dimension, communicate to the people what is being done to address the situation. Essentially, the CSOs can help promote and foster transparency in the rehabilitation and recovery efforts. The development partners and international organizations, another very important group. They can also help, especially in dealing with complex rehabilitation and recovery efforts, i.e. large-scale rehabilitation and recovery work. At times, joint ownership with international partners facilitate long-term commitments to projects and supplements or complements government efforts. It is essential, however, that clear coordination mechanisms are put in place to ensure smooth collaboration among parties at various stages. And last but not the least, and perhaps the most important stakeholders, the affected communities. The affected communities are in the best position to provide local knowledge and experience in shaping the rehabilitation and recovery strategy at the community level. The most vulnerable groups in the community who needs the assistance the most are known or visible to the communities and thus can be given the necessary attention that they deserve. by having an inclusive process in planning and implementation of rehabilitation and recovery intervention helps ensure long-term success as real needs are correctly identified and sustainable solutions are provided. We have too many examples of rehabilitation that remain a challenge as the solutions adopted did not consider the affected communities' realities. I think several, of rehabilitation and recovery work for Yolanda are still unutilized because of the mismatch between what the communities actually need and desire and what was provided to them. All of this we can learn as we move forward in this particular course. In summary, let us always remember that recovery and rehabilitation work is an essential component of the disaster risk reduction management spectrum. It is ideal if from the very beginning, the Council, the NDRRMC, is already able to organize the proper structures to facilitate rehabilitation and recovery work. It is also important that the NDRRMO assist the LCEs in overseeing the overall rehabilitation efforts. As I mentioned earlier, the local chief executive or the LGU may decide on the kind of subcommittees it will organize depending on the characteristic of the disaster in the area. It is very important that this is going to be attended to early so that recovery and rehabilitation work is pursued properly as well as restoring back to normalcy is facilitated. Thank you and have a good day.